Next up, this is going to be powerful. It's actually called New Power: How to Maintain Policy Momentum in Florida and the United States. Our speakers are Dawn Shirreffs, Florida Director of the Environmental Defense Fund, and Chris Castro, Climate First Bank Founding Director and EVP-Chief Sustainability Officer. Thank you, you powerhouses, and please shed some light on good policy momentum. Take it away.
Oh my goodness, thank you all so much. Thank you for the warm introduction, and appreciate everybody for joining us in this afternoon session. My name is Chris Castro again. As you heard, I'm now at Climate First Bank, but I'm coming after 3 years in the Biden-Harris administration. I was the Chief of Staff for state and community energy programs, really helping to provide funding for tribes, local governments, state energy offices, communities, to really continue to accelerate our work. And I'm excited to now be in a new role that's focused on how the private sector can continue to lead the charge for climate action.
Thanks, folks. So my name is Dawn Shirreffs, and I am with the Environmental Defense Fund. If you don't know EDF, we're a global organization founded in 1967, working to really use science and economics to address our challenges. Oh, clicker. Delighted to be here with you today, and really thrilled for the incredible programming that the VOA Foundation team has put on today, because we have heard such incredible ideas. People have been generous in sharing their expertise, and what we're really hoping to do today, Chris and I, is sort of gather all of that up and talk about how we pivot to maintain momentum together in this next chapter and bring others to this table.
Wonderful. So to start out, one of my mantras that I like to share is that we replicate what we celebrate. And I think in this current moment, over the last 6 to 7 weeks, there has been obviously a complete disruption in the trajectory that we were moving. And in conversations with everybody that I've had here, I can tell that people are still down and out. We're going through these kind of 5 stages of grief still, pretty much. And I think it's important to reflect on the unbelievable progress that we have made and are making today before we start to reflect on what the pivot looks like. So first and foremost, the Biden-Harris administration will go down in history because of the work in advancing climate as a key pillar of an overall industrial economic strategy. It was really about pivoting our economy to one that was carbon-free by the science-based targets of 2050. And in order to do that, early on, and this was because of the momentum, by the way, of many in this audience, many of you as leaders, that started a decade ago in thinking about what the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law and the Inflation Reduction Act could be if we hit a point where the stars aligned and we were able to actually drive deep, meaningful action. When I was in the city of Orlando. I was leading our, Office of Sustainability and Resilience, Greenworks Orlando. I saw KOB has been with us here. Appreciate you guys being here and the good work. And I got plucked by President Biden to come up to the Department of Energy. And it was because of the first law that was passed. It was the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. This was intended to help drive climate resilient infrastructure and invest in our workers and ultimately provide the funding that was needed to really, to really begin to transform us in a positive direction. Secondly, we had the CHIPS and Science Act, and that doesn't get talked about a lot, but it was essential for us to think about onshoring the critical minerals and supply chains and to boost domestic manufacturing of these clean energy technologies that we need to move us, right? And so instead of us being so dependent on other adversaries, other nations to do that, we needed to boost this. And we knew that the CHIPS Act was going to invest in research and innovation, these regional ecosystems, as well as manufacturing. And then, of course, everybody realizes the Inflation Reduction Act was the big climate law, right? And the majority of that was enabling tax credits and rebates that provided consumers and businesses with the assurance and the incentives to go deep in investing, right? So you have this trifecta of essentially the recipe for climate action at the government level. From that, we've had pretty tremendous progress that we've made. By January 20th, I think it's fascinating to say that we had invested more than $500 billion, $500 billion into the economy to begin moving us. And that wasn't just energy, that was everything from agriculture and housing, FEMA and the like. But the interesting thing is that clean energy not only doubled the amount of fossil fuel investments that we had in 2024, but it was 96% of all new generation of power that came online that was interconnected into the grid. 2/3 of that was just solar alone. And so we're seeing that the marketplace is favoring these carbon-free technologies. We also saw a really increase in the utility scale, right, of generation capacities. This is really showing us how many we added. And I talked about the 96% of new power, but it was 62 gigawatts of electricity. That's 30 Hoover dams that we installed in the United States in a single year. It was by far the most generation that we've installed in renewables that we've ever seen. And so there's a lot of investment going into the space. The other thing is, and I briefly touched about it with the CHIPS Act, is the growth in the clean energy manufacturing. By January 20th, there were over 900 clean energy factories that were already in process of being built across this country. Many of them in rural communities that have been disinvested in for generations, that didn't have essentially an opportunity as the imminent coal plant was closing. And in fact, the Biden-Harris administration created an entire interagency working group for energy communities, coal and mining communities that were going through an imminent transition, and us as the whole of government to think about how do we go and support these communities. That is multi-year funded and continuing to work today, even in this administration. But manufacturing, think about the 900 factories and at least 1,000 people per factory on average that are being employed across this country to not only produce panels and batteries, but also recycle them and properly create a circularity of the clean energy economy. So I think that that's fascinating. And then workforce, right? This is about jobs, putting people to work with meaningful wages that drive wealth building, and a real focus on communities that for a long time haven't had that same access. We saw 400,000 new net jobs enter the energy marketplace just in the last 2 years since the Inflation Reduction Act was passed, 2.5 years. Staggering growth in the amount of investment and, again, employment that's happening in the clean energy economy. And this is really across all 50 states, no matter the color of your county and city. In fact, 80% of the money that we officially obligated that has been out the door and can't be clawed back went to Republican GOP districts. Communities that had, less than average, populations that graduated with high school diplomas and the like. So it's meaningful and intentional work. And so that's important to reflect on. That is fact. This has happened. This is the momentum that moving forward we're building from. And I think as we all look to the transition, we need to really be grounded in the collective action that we've had to date. When you compare us to where we were as we entered into Trump 1, it's not even a fraction of where we are today. The organization, the collaboration that we have in this room, the funders and the support that we're seeing, it's on a whole nother level. So as we move forward, I think it's important now, Don, for you to help us pivot into kind of what's new in this moment.
Thanks, and I think, the question is what changes about our advocacy? What changes about our work, right? We just got a lot of information about what's out there. And I often say innovation is great, but we can't afford to wait. The next 10 years really are critical. Florida doesn't have a reputation for being a leadership state on climate, but we're number 2 for EV vehicle adoption and residential solar installation. In 2024, we built 3 gigawatts of large-scale solar, making it the second state behind only Texas in utility-scale solar capacity. So don't sleep on Florida. Natural gas prices are going to climb in the next 2 years. That is going to drive up energy costs. So for folks that are sort of trying to figure out how to make ends meet, how to buy eggs, we are really going to be speaking their language, because natural gas is 15% more expensive to build, and that's if you could actually get your hands on it, than solar. Because NextEra's CEO will be the first one to tell you, you can't get a turbine until 2030 or later. So there's a reality check to our dependence on fossil fuels. It is economic, and it is based on supply chain and logistics. So what's really different? The economics are on our side. That's a new space for us that have been in the game for a while now. So I want to talk about new power. This slide's a little bit inspired by a book by Henry Timms that came out around 2019, 2020, that really looked at movements and how we have shifted from the sort of like elite power happens in one place to movements really shaping things. And it's a great book, and I significantly recommend that you grab it. But just to ground us, like, power is defined as the ability to produce intended effects. It is very clear in this moment we cannot rely on Washington or even the international community to get it done. Raise your hand if you woke up and doom scrolled on your phone this morning like I did. All of you already understand this, or you wouldn't be here. We cannot proceed with business as usual in the climate advocacy community. We need to self-reflect, look at our own organizations, our processes, and our procedures. Because I gotta tell you, multiple sign-offs and bureaucratic review are the wrong tools to catch lightning. And we need to be ready and fearless to seize every opportunity to move the ball forward and hold policymakers accountable. So I'm going to ask for a little forgiveness to ignore the red and blue. I, as a Rollins alum, was so cautious not to have any Canes, Gator, or Knowles colors on this map. I didn't even realize I was putting partisan stuff up there.
Go Tars.
But this is a quick analysis of where we saw truly competitive races. So again, blue and red don't mean anything here, but truly competitive races in 2024 at both the state and federal level happened in 3 key regions. Okay, we're a huge state. We have almost 20 million people. Where are the places that we can elevate our issue? This isn't about supporting a party. This is about making sure that all the candidates in these places who need an edge in order to win are messaging on our issue. We need to be very focused geographically so that we have a strong middle elevating our issue. There's something called the 3.5% rule. This was a Harvard initiative that says if you can activate 3.5% of your population, you win, right? That's the science of movement building. Well, it's harder to motivate 3.5% of 20 million people. But when you start to look in just these small areas, it becomes a lot more feasible.
Thousands of people, right? It becomes attainable.
So we really need to narrow our focus. We don't have time to waste. I can't remember. Oh, there we go. So what's the work ahead? I know that others are doing a lot on storytelling. So those of you that have met or had the privilege to work with former Senator and Governor Bob Graham, he wrote a book called America, the Owner's Manual, which is another great, I'm outing myself as a bibliophile here, book, but he always used to show up at a conference every year on restoration and give us a homework assignment. And so I'm feeling inspired by Bob Graham today. And the homework that we're going to leave you with today is that yelling louder and screaming we're all going to die in 2050 is stopping us from doing the critical work of listening, hearing the concerns of our neighbors, engaging skeptics with data, and working to build a broader coalition of partners that we will absolutely need to move the needle. We have to protect democracy. Right now, there is literally a bill in Tallahassee seeking to take away direct democracy, the ability of citizens to put an issue on the ballot for a vote. We have to safeguard these tools. The shock and awe blitz of attacks on science and kindness are designed to overwhelm us and distract us. We can't do that. They are looking to get us to that place so that we are not paying attention when they remove the democratic tools that we have to make lawmakers listen.
It's the everything, everywhere, all at once shock, right? Immediately, day one, 130 actions. And what I saw very quickly was the intermixing of lanes that all of a sudden people started to get into because of the frenzy, right? And that's part of the strategy to create the chaos and allow for the dismantling on the back end if we're not aware and intentional.
Yep. The next is make it really local, right? So you have to build capacity in specific places. You have to build private sector partners. You have to build all sorts of new relationships. In democracy, listening is more important than talking. So you need to get in there and make sure that you have strong base in those specific geographic areas and go relationships, relationships, relationships. There is a reason that some folks that are elected officials are unwilling to have conversations with their constituents. You have got to make their backyard untenable if they will not act on climate, whoever they are.
And now you have private sector that is taking the torch and moving it forward. Obviously, Climate First Bank is a prime example of how we're trying to use the markets of capitalism to advance this work and build it so that it's not dependent on government subsidy per se. Private sector is a critical partner, and in Florida, being headquartered here, I want you all to consider how Climate First Bank can support the advancement of the work.
I definitely stole this last one from Chris, but he's right, because joy is a critical ingredient to our success. So all of you are not in here because it's your job. You're in here because it's your passion. And that means we got to make sure that we keep our fire ignited. Joy has literally been proven to improve your sleep, your digestion, and your mental health minutes. So let's make sure we celebrate. We're going to need all the Carolyn Lewis dance parties we can have, because we don't clock out, right?
We need to bring in musicians and entertainers, artists, right? No, this is not a joke. This is about having fun and showing the world that we can do well by doing good. And so it is about broadening that, and bringing in arts and culture into our movement is absolutely critical. I got to name drop A.Y. Young, who's the sustainable performing artist, right? He's UN designated, and in fact, he's looking to enter what's called the Battery Tour. He's on track to do 1,000 concerts powered by 100% renewable energy. He's on 958. Adam, if you're in the room, he did NYC Climate Week last year. He's about to do it again this year. And he's looking at Florida as a key market to come into, from Miami to St. Pete to Orlando, Tallahassee, Jacksonville, and really use engagement and entertainment and this immersive experience of art and music to change hearts and minds for the better, right? That's an example of what we need to scale.
And here's how we know it brings folks. How many of you remember when members of Congress who voted against the Inflation Reduction Act showed up for the ribbon cuttings? Yeah. Nobody wants to join a losing team, but we're not losing. We're actually winning.
We are.
We have momentum. We're going to keep doing it by being bold and fearless, and most importantly, by being together on this journey. Everyone in this room and a whole bunch of people outside of this room we're going to bring in.
Love it. So, we'd love to open it up maybe for the last few minutes that we have and enter into a dialogue. Any questions in general?
Yes.
Spoke to some friends of mine who also looked into it, and our takeaway was that this was a pretty standard bank that slapped some solar panels on it for marketing. I've also followed you for a while, and my impression of you is this is a guy with chops. So the idea that you've joined Climate First Bank is telling me maybe I need to take another look at it. So tell me what Climate First Bank is doing with regard to climate that isn't being done by other more standard banks.
Thank you for the question, and would love for you to reconsider, right, working with us. So thank you for being open to it. Climate First Bank is the nation's first FDIC-insured digital community bank. We are the green bank depository that you think about, right? When we want to move our money into a values-aligned institution. I think one of the biggest things that we can educate ourselves about is the fact that all of us, all of our deposits are sleeping and being leveraged behind our back in order to advance either what you care about or go against it. And for me, as for those who have followed, I've been in this movement for 18 years, going on 20 years now, dedicating my entire life. And I had the epiphany that although I was doing the great climate work and advancing these companies and nonprofits, I was still literally financing the next pipeline behind my back. And that it was impossible for us to solve this problem unless we created an institution with guardrails. Our founder, Ken LaRoe, this is his third bank, right? And interestingly enough, it's very focused on driving the mission. So how are we separate? One, from day one, we've been net zero in our operations, Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions. We're on track to begin moving towards our financed emissions and getting those down as well. Two, we are a public benefit corporation. So through and through, in terms of our entity, we knew that in addition to our shareholders and ensuring profit of this bank, we also needed to do what was right for people, our community, and the planet. And so not only are we a public benefit corporation, we became one of the only B Corp banks in the country. And we're very, very proud about that. We've joined the Net Zero Banking Alliance, and at its core, this bank is really about trying to use our collective deposits to invest in good in our communities. We do certainly have clean energy loans. We certainly are funding affordable housing and workforce development efforts. And soon, all account holders are going to be able to actually have the transparency of where our money is being invested and how your money is going for good. We're launching an impact banking app, and just by being an account holder, you're going to see behind the curtains of where these dollars actually get invested and how we're using the banking model as a force for good.
I'll just add, as an account holder, I went in looking to see how competitive it would be, right? I wanted to open up a CD. What were the rates? What were the returns? And they were out-competing your traditional banks that didn't share my values. So it was a no-brainer for me.
Mm-hmm. There's a 5% money market account for businesses. It's a 4.6% for individual checking account. I mean, there's real opportunities for it to be a competitive product, and we're seeing that. Now, we've been chartered by FDIC to be a national depository. We've opened across all 50 states with a digital branch that now literally have account holders in every state, and we're able to start lending. We're in 43 states on the clean energy side. We're in all 50 states on the commercial side. And it's exciting because we're getting projects like portfolio of community solar farms in Virginia that we're looking to support, and battery storage systems that are supporting grid reliability and resilience, and just even regenerative agriculture projects supporting organic blueberry farms, and even Palomino farms in South Georgia that are supporting soil health and restoration. There's some really interesting approaches, and our goal is to really do well and do good.
I think we have time for one more question before Carolyn gives us the hook. Yes, ma'am. That's you right there in the middle.
Hi. First of all, I'm Colleen. I work with We Are Neutral, so I can vouch for the Net Zero Climate First Bank.
Thank you for being our partner from day one.
Yeah, thank you. So myself and everybody that I know, we're tired. A lot of us in my community are sick, disabled, etc. So where in your opinion would be the best place to start in our communities, kind of organizing in this capacity, especially for those of us who are tired? If we can do one thing, if you had to give, what would you say?
So I think there are two parts. So the first is, I would say, just have an authentic conversation with somebody who you don't think shares all your values, and don't hold them to a purity test. But the other thing is, for those of us that are weary, and I get it, and I am too, is you actually combat that weariness by action. There's tons of data that show when people, I just reading some research that they gave folks who were suffering from depression very small amounts of money, dollars, to just give out to other people. And that they very quickly found that increased, or decreased rather, the depression that those individuals were suffering. The antidote to the exhaustion, weirdly, is action and activating. And so the one thing matters less than doing one thing.
Mm-hmm. I would also just add that there's an incredible network of community-based organizations and nonprofits, many of which are in this room, the Clio Institute, Ideas for Us, many of our Sierra Club chapters, League of Women Voters, Jobs with Justice, you name it, you go down the line, and there are a lot of organizations, and I would just encourage you to find one of them that you very much align with, that gives you energy instead of, to your point, almost takes it. And lean into it. Those organizations, many of which are organized, and they're in coalitions, and they're working together at the state level and local levels to pass these policies. And the last thing I want to say is, This game in this transition will be led by our communities, and it's going to be led by local governments, philanthropy, the private sector, right? We are seeing a huge void in this, and at the end of the day, we can continue to drive this forward. We just have to stay focused and continue to collaborate.
This is what we mean by leaders in action. Thank you.